Part 1. Introduction. I first met John Edmonds in 2012. A mutual friend contacted me and asked me if I was interested in taking a look at a non-fiction book project. He began to describe a UFO story taking place in Arizona. I was never that interested in the whole world of extrapolitics and extraterrestrials. I knew it existed. I didn't disbelieve it. It just wasn't on my radar. At the time, the only book I had published to good reviews was a work of adult literary fiction in Canada. I fancied myself a kind of Canadian Mark Twain, a humorist and a social observer. I got very good reviews across Canada, but my second novel didn't publish. My living comes from technical writing in telecommunications and software. After persistent badgering from a friend, I decided to have a chat with John Edmonds. The three of us got together on a conference call, and John began to tell me what was going on at his ranch. I wouldn't say I was skeptical, it's just that I wasn't really that interested. I had read the Billy Meyer work about the Palladian contact in Switzerland, and I found all that to be a bit dubious. My fundamental question was, what impact does this have on humanity? Why should people be giving their time to this topic? How is it any more important than us becoming a more cooperative and compassionate species so that we can survive on this planet? After some persuasion, I decided to give the book a try. John Edmonds and I set up a working process. We talked on Skype every day, and I recorded the conversations and started to write. After some months of this, I quit. I can't really describe what happened back then. I became very negative towards the material. It was the only manuscript I never finished. 7 years went by, and I never gave the book on Stardust Ranch a second thought. My life changed dramatically. I decided to leave North America and go into the wilds of Costa Rica. I bought some land in the rainforest in the south of Costa Rica, a place known as the Talamanca Mountain Range, designated a United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, heritage site. It might well be the most biodiverse 1,000 square kilometers in the world. I brought my 18-year-old son over when he finished high school. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do, and he wanted to take some time off before he went to the post-secondary education or into a trade. So father and son made their way into the rainforest and began to build earthbag houses. It was a wonderful project, and we both learned Spanish and grew into a little campesino culture on the mountain, which is a mix of Ticos and Quebecer natives. Jaguars roam the mountains. Howler monkeys scream through the jungle at night with a mating call that is the loudest sound in nature, the decibel level exceeding a rock concert. When walking off-road, knee-high boots are mandatory because of the many varieties of snakes, more than a few of them being very venomous. The insect world was equally fascinating. Spiders that can kill a horse with an ankle bite. Praying mantises of exquisite composition and beauty. Bullet ants, named so because of their bite is more painful than being shot. And too many other insects to name and describe. The birds are glorious. Wild parrots and hummingbirds of magnificent colour and beauty. The Talamanca Mountains are a magical place. I've lived here for 3 years now, continuing my trade of technical writing through remote work. I liberated myself from Toronto, Canada, learned to grow food and raise animals, and now I have 50 banana plants, pineapple, a large garden, a pig pen, a chicken coop, and I'm thinking of raising rabbits. I buy milk and cheese from a Nicaraguan neighbour with a cow. In summation, I utterly unplugged myself from the middle-class upbringing in Ottawa and my 20-year career in technology in Toronto. I own my time. This is a very beautiful feeling I wish on everybody. Time is the real currency in a human life. Time to read the classic books and the sacred poetry. Time to meditate in a sacramental way. Time to walk my dog through the dirt roads and the paths crisscrossing the mountains, and time to do the work I want to do. Then something truly odd started. I began getting visits from UFOs. My neighbours took pictures of large orbs over my house and showed them to me. Something started happening inside the house. There was a weird smell, something like copper, rubbing alcohol, and blood mixed together. I had the distinct impression that something was visiting me. It was around this time I started to think back to the failed book project with John Edmonds. I had also been reminded of John at the end of 2017, when his story went national in the press. Everybody was talking about it, most of the print media outlets and a lot of the broadcasters. I reached out to him and we spoke briefly. It was decided that we could start the book again, and this time we would finish it. I'll give you an overview of the story with the New York Post. Man desperately trying to sell his alien-infested ranch, by Gabriel Fonrouge, October 26, 2017. An Arizona man has put his ranch up for sale because he says he's been harassed for years by aliens who even tried to abduct his wife, reports said. John Edmonds, owner of the Stardust Ranch in Rainbow Valley, about an hour west of Phoenix, is a popular figure in the alien believers community and has publicised his purported encounters with extraterrestrials on Facebook, claiming it's been the reason he wants to sell the ranch, 12 News TV reported. They actually levitated my wife out of the bed in the master chamber and carried her into the parking lot and tried to draw her up into the craft, he said, according to the outlet. This is why I want to move. He said in the last 20 years, he has experienced many strange events involving aliens and claims to have killed more than a dozen extraterrestrials on his sprawling ranch. A photo posted on his Facebook in March shows a bloodied samurai sword in a pool of what looks like dried blood from an alien he says he killed March 13th. In another photo, he shows a picture of a wound on his calf and wrote that it came from an alien. Wounds from recent attack here at Stardust Ranch, upper right calf from the battle with malevolent ET, he wrote. The property has been featured on Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel and has garnered international attention. He recommends anyone interested in the $5 million property to be very well grounded. It's not something for a traditional family, but it holds a lot of secrets and what I believe are future opportunities to understand forces that are in the universe. Please be very well grounded because the energy here has the tendency to manifest with whatever is going on with you, he said. I can assure you John's whole story has never been told. There are aspects of it he can't quite articulate to the headlining seeking media or to the television programs interested only in the paranormal. This is the whole story of Stardust Ranch. Bruce McDonald. End of introduction.
And there you go, the introduction to Stardust Ranch as read by Montgomery Dean in Australia. I'm Bruce McDonald and this is the Talamanca Review. It's the 18th of June and it's 6:10 p.m. And I'm going to get into this, but I'm just going to use this as an excuse to talk about everything and anything I want to talk about related to UFOs. And there's a lot. So we're going to get into this and we're going to kick it up. Let me just crank up the volume here a little bit if I can. Sorry about that. Just, yeah, there we go. No, that should be good. I mean, it's already cranked up a little bit. Okay. It's just when I look at the meters down at on the OBS guide, I don't see the volume kicking where I think it should be kicking. Okay, how do I want to begin this? I mean, these topics are so huge. Like when I go to think about talking about Stardust Ranch, it's like, holy cow, man. It's like me asking one of you guys to sum up your entire high school experience, right? Like all 4 years of high school, or your college experience, or your relationship with your parents, or something on that scope. It's not just a book. It was a deep dive into the world of exopolitics with a man who I consider to be a kind of an alien ambassador on this planet, John Edmonds. There was nobody quite like him. He kept a much lower profile than he could have had. He could have had a much bigger profile than he did. He could have been a household name. He could have been famous. But I don't think he really cared that much. A lot of these people with expanded consciousness, like John and Robert, they have different values and different, I don't want to say desires, but I can't think of a replacement word, different ambitions with their lives. They're not like us, okay? Well, I've changed quite a bit too, but they're not like the normal human being. They don't care about lots of money. They don't care about being famous. They have entered into an area of experience in life where The reward is the experience. The experience is not a stepping stone to a reward. Okay, and let's be honest, most of our lives are structured in a way that everything we do, we expect reward. When we work out, we expect the reward of health, muscle tone, enhanced attractiveness to the opposite sex, or the same sex if you're gay, and all that sort of stuff. Everything we do is infested with the human ambition. But John Edmonds was not infected with this. I sometimes wonder why he even wanted his story told. And I know he did. I know he had been looking for a writer for years. And was very difficult for him to find a writer that he could work with and that he could transmit knowledge to, because John was telepathic. A lot of this book came to me in dreams. A lot of this book came to me in sudden insight and intuition, and that was John. And Bob can do the same thing. You're dealing with highly evolved consciousnesses that can communicate in indirect ways. All spiritual people can communicate in indirect ways. Okay, nonverbal, like just consciousness to consciousness. And in many instances, from life to death, they can communicate with the dead as well. Not that they do it all the time. I mean, necromancy is not something you want to be doing all the time, but it's there. So John wanted this book told, and he chose me to tell the book, to write the book, to tell the story. He chose me. And I think he chose me the first time he met me in 2012, which is recounted in the introduction read by Montgomery Dean. And it's true, I did get a little bit afraid, and I was embarrassed to be writing a UFO book. You know, a lot of times the most interesting stuff in life we don't allow ourselves to explore because we're worried about what other people will think. And I have not been immune to that for most of my life. Up here, I really don't give a shit. I mean, my wife does. You know, when we're going to town and stuff, I'm told what to wear, and you can't go like that, and, you know, you can't wear sandals, and it's all this crazy nonsense, right? And I'm like, what? Like, who do I have to impress? If I'm eating up here, if I'm eating and I spill food on my shirt, like my white t-shirt or my white tank top or something, I probably won't change the shirt for the rest of the day. I'll just finish the day with that shirt because I'm not going out in public. Nobody's going to see me except my wife, but it kind of drives her crazy. So, and John was a bit like this. I mean, he really didn't give a shit what people thought. And he was a repository of information that you could not equate what he knew by experience to anything. John Edmonds' life was more expansive in terms of its ET contact and its understanding of what's going on this planet than all of those History Channel series put together. You know, Skinwalker Ranch, the Secrets of Skinwalker, and all of this sort of stuff, which has become really, really popular now. But John, he just knew everything. I think what he realized was he'd reached a point of understanding through experience where he couldn't translate it. It became like spiritual knowledge, where if you really want to get it, you have to do what the teacher says, you know, whether it be a shaman or a guru or a Jesuit or a rabbi. And you want to know what they know, they'll set out a course of behavior for you that may seem completely unrelated to what you're trying to achieve. And that course of behavior may go on for days, weeks, months, or years. And this is just to transmit the information and the experience. John, as a consciousness, had kind of reached that level as well. Like if you were to say to John, John, what is the UFO experience? What's going on with UFOs? He would just say something like, that's too big a question. There's like so many dimensions to that question, I can't answer it. It would be like saying, what's God? Or what's the meaning of life? It's just a question that he could have answered, but would have been difficult. So what he did was he would drop a lot of hints, and then you'd have to think about what he said. And then you would either get the realization or you wouldn't get the realization. And a lot of times he would create opportunities for experience to happen to you. So, I mean, if you've been following this YouTube channel, you know that I'm no stranger to multidimensional experience manifesting in the world. I told you, the simple ghost story. I told you about communicating with the murdered woman in 2002, 2003, when I was writing the true crime nonfiction book, which I found online yesterday, actually, so like a pirated copy, which is kind of strange, but yeah, kind of blank there for a sec. So yeah, getting back on track. So John could set up opportunities for you, okay? But you had to be in the right state of mind to capture the opportunity, or you'd miss it, okay? So there was a tremendous field of resistance around this book. I experienced it in 2012. Now, I've already admitted that part of my excuse for not working on it in 2012 or finishing it in 2012 was I was a little bit embarrassed to be working on a UFO story. But you hear the thunder there? But in 2019, I was ready. And there's something about the life I chose to live up here in the mountain that just, it freed me from all of that nonsense and stuff. So, but that aside, that was the me, which was an influence in stopping the book in 2012. But on top of that, there was something else. And I experienced it again in 2019. And I would describe it as a wall of resistance. Okay? And I mean, it was tangible. I mean, it wasn't like concrete. It wasn't like these earth bag walls here. 22-inch earth bag walls covered in lime and concrete. No, it wasn't like that. But it was just like a constant suggestion being put into your mind, like, don't do this. And if you didn't listen, little things would happen, like you would have trouble concentrating. You would have little bouts of bad luck for a few days, like, where are my car keys? Where did I put my cell phone? Like weird little stuff like that, okay? And then it got to a point where like that wasn't enough to make me quit. And this was in 2019. It got to a point where I had like a noise in my head, and not a spiritual noise, not what the Greeks would call the music of the spheres, not the melodies of the Creator, something else. And it was like a white noise. I describe it as like, you remember back for those of you the same age as me, you remember when we used to stay up late on a weekend, and maybe our parents didn't know we were staying up late, and maybe you were sleeping in the basement or something, and you'd have the TV on, and then the channel would go off because they didn't have 24-hour TV back then, and you would get that broadcast symbol with the Indian head on it and native head, and you'd get that like white noise around it, and that white noise sort of staticky sound. It was like that, but in my head. It was like the space between radio stations, but in my head. And really, really annoying. Like it could drive you crazy, okay? And I knew that was being put there. You may say to yourself, well, Bruce, wow, I mean, can't you protect yourself from these things? Can't you, do this? Can't you do that? Yeah, I suppose I could have asked for help. The thing is to always ask for help, because there's loads and loads of beings over there on the other side, on the other dimensions, that want to help us. The same way we want to help people when we're alive, if we're good-natured and God-centered people. We enjoy helping other people, and just for the reward of doing it, just for being of service, which is how an individual begins to connect with the whole, with the all. It's just by being of service. And there's loads of beings on the other side that are the same way, and they don't mind helping an incarnate human being. But I didn't think to ask for help. So this is like June 2019, like 5 years ago. And this static in my head just kept getting louder and louder and louder and louder and more consistent. I could escape it when I meditated. So when I meditate, I go somewhere else. I literally leave the field of the body and the psyche, and I go somewhere else. But to do work in the physical plane, I have to come back into my body. And as soon as I would come back into my body, this white noise would be there. And I don't know, I would place it like right here. It was like back of the head kind of thing. Same place that the Catholics and Bob says that the demonic energy comes into you. It's usually the back of the head, right where the head and the neck meet. That's the point where a lot of negative energies come into the body. And I was thinking of quitting again. Like, it was seriously crossing my mind. And I was saying to my wife, I don't know if I can write this book. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I want to do this. And she was just like, well, suit yourself, She really didn't care. She didn't have any grand opinion either way. Now, as I was considering stopping the book for a second time, which I think would have broken John's heart. I think it would have broken his heart, right? Because I think he had made up his mind, or he knew something I didn't know at the time, that I was supposed to write this book for him, that we were supposed to work on this book together. And so what happened was a brilliant white light came into the house. This very house I'm in right now. A white light came into the house. It was about the size of a small, like a Nerf football, about that big. And it was really freaky. My wife snapped a photo of it with her cell phone. And it just hovered above the bed. And it was there for like 10 minutes. My wife said it was an angel. I had a very, very positive feeling to it. Like, very, very positive feeling to it. And it just sort of hung there, What are you up to, buddy? And this is not Balzac, the orange cat. This is another one. Oh, I just had 3 kittens. I woke up to 3 kittens this morning, too. You can come out and say hello, buddy? Or are you just going to skirt off there? Here he comes. Oh, it's going right under the camera. You're not going to see him. Okay. What's up, buddy? Anyways, this white light came in, and it cleaned out the whole house. It stopped all that energy in the back of my head. It did all those things, and it was a really beautiful experience. And I knew then that I was supposed to finish the book. And so I made up my mind at that point that, look, I'm gonna finish this book. And I guess I was only about 30,000 words into it. Now, it's important also to tell you how I felt about extraterrestrials and UFOs at the time. I didn't give a shit. I knew they existed, but I was more interested in spiritual stuff. I was more interested in deep meditation. I was more interested in studying the works of contemporary saints like Madhyama, things like this. I was more interested in mantra, breathing exercises, fasting, all of these things. I knew UFOs existed, but to be honest with you, I've always considered UFOs very low consciousness stuff. Now, if you live in a completely material reality, you may think UFOs are high consciousness stuff. And I suppose if you're living in a material outlook, you're not wrong. But from where I was coming from, it was no big deal. I had already at this point, in my spiritual journey, I had already read The Gods of Eden by William Bramley.
What are you doing there, buddy?
Yeah, The Gods of Eden by William Bramley is an extraordinary book. And it documents a lot of very weird phenomenon. I would say it was an inspired book, and I ended up speaking to William Bramley by email. And definitely an inspired book. Something of a cult classic. It still sells. It's got thousands of reviews on Amazon. It's just one of those books, like the little engine that could. And Stardust Ranch is becoming the same sort of thing. I would describe the book as a cult classic. Like if a mainstream publishing house had published this book and it kept selling the way it's selling without any revenue invested in it, without anybody advertising it, without anybody doing podcasts or anything, they would consider it a success. And it is the most successful book of my life in terms of the number of people that have bought it and the number of people that have read it. So you could probably do like a 5-to-1 on readers, but based on the number of copies sold. So I would say that based on the number of copies of the book that have sold. Now this is audiobook, paperback, hardcover, and Kindle. Okay. I would say that all in, probably like 35,000 people have read this book, like all over the world. And the reviews are from all over the world as well. So in that regard, it's a very successful book. And I enjoy hearing from people. As I said, there's occasionally a relatively negative experience when I go and I check the reviews, and I find out that some jackass has put a 1-star review in there because they find the book demonic and it offends their fundamentalist Christian outlook. I mean, I get it. I'll be honest with you, that kind of shit, it's like sandpaper on my balls. I don't like it. It's just like, how dare you? I respect your religious outlook on life, but who the fuck do you think you are, man? That's the way I feel about it anyways. I gotta take a little break here. My wife just got back from church and I don't think she knows I'm recording. Okay, I'm back. That actually turned into a pretty substantive break. We ended up having a bite to eat and watching half of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Anyway, so back to Stardust Ranch and back to everything I learned, not only in writing the book, but in getting to know John Edmonds. So there were so many things that I asked John, because he was just like a living encyclopedia after 25 years of living on the ranch. And he had so many unique perspectives on things. And a lot of the stuff he said was just so unbelievably accurate. I remember asking him, are we destined to go to the stars as human beings? And he said, yes and no was basically his answer, how I would sum it up. He said that in a sense, we already are in the stars. And that was something of an esoteric statement. But in terms of physically leaving this planet and going and traveling in the solar system and the galaxy and then outside of the galaxy and then other places, he said that there was graduation of sorts, and that by universal expectation, human beings had to grasp most of what was, if not all, of what was to be learned just on a planet. And what there is to learn on a planet is mind-boggling. And when he told me this, I despaired a little bit. Because it seemed to me, based on what he told me, that we were in a cycle of failure as a species, the human race. That in every one of our epochs, we get some things right and we get other things wrong, but we can't get everything working together, is basically what he said. And I remember being blown away by this and thinking about this I still think about it like 5 years later, what he said. So he said the test for a race to be given the opportunity, an opportunity comes in the form of inspiration. You see, our inner lives are connected to everything. But those inner lives can have barriers and blocks put up in them so certain inspirations don't come into the human race. They may come into certain individuals who attain mastery in a life, mastery over their own consciousness and reconnection with the Creator, which sounds like a very religious thing, but it's actually the most natural thing in the world. So what I mean by getting the epochs wrong, so we'll go through a phase as a human species where we're largely naturalistic. We live in tribes, we don't build much. What we do build is extremely primitive compared to the way we do architecture and manufacturing today. It might be just wood or stone or clay huts. And we live a largely agrarian life and somewhat of a hunter-gatherer life with respect for nature. And this variant of the human being learns a portion of what it is that a human being has to learn while we're down here. And that is respect for communication with and cooperation with all of the natural processes in a non-abusive way. And this includes the ability to talk to plants, animals, and most life forms on the planet. And this is a direct form of communication that's quite literal. And if that sounds odd to you, I bring up the example of Wade Davis, the explorer in residence at National Geographic for a number of years. He was part of the group that went into the Amazon and started mapping out all of the possible patentable materials for the pharmaceutical companies. Although that wasn't his role or function, he was an anthropologist and was generally accompanied by biologists and chemists when he went on these sojourns into the rainforest, usually the Brazilian rainforest. And Wade Davis interacted with a lot of native peoples in different parts of the world, but mainly here down around the equator, and mainly in the Brazilian rainforest, where they're still, for the most part, cut off from the rest of the world. And he learned there that the natives had the ability to speak to the plants. And well, let me put that a different way, because speak is not, the plants would come to them in dreams and tell them things. And then they would remember the dreams and they would apply what they were told, and they were able to fabricate extremely complicated compounds and medicines. And the shamanic tradition that Wade Davis was told was that this was a communication with the plants themselves. That always just blew me away. Now, I heard that before I heard what John Edmonds told me. And then John introduced me to a lot of his friends, people he had assembled over the years, and they were just remarkable people. I met a woman who could speak to horses, and other animals, dogs, cats. Such people exist. And I don't mean speak to them in the way the shaman described the plants speaking to them in dreams. This was more of a direct telepathic communication with the animals. And there are people out there who become so adept at this that they can sometimes be called in by large reserves and animal sanctuaries when they don't know what to do with certain animals, and this woman would go in and speak to the animal that was afflicted and say, what ails you, basically. And the animal would tell her. If it was, let's say, for example, a jaguar, the jaguar would say, my mate and I were together when we first went into captivity, and then we got separated, and I don't know where she is now. And the human animal translator would tell the zookeepers or the sanctuary people or the reserve people, the animal reserve people. And then they would go and find the mate and bring the mate, and the animal would be happy again. I give you these examples because what John Edmonds said was the truth. We are supposed to accomplish certain things down here in a cooperative way as the steward. I don't say king, but the steward as the one who sits in place of the king, steward of nature. We're supposed to be assisting and communicating with nature. We're not supposed to be exploiting it and tearing it apart the way we are. And again, I feel it's necessary to give my standard refrain here, which is that I am not going woke. I'm not talking about climate change or anything like that, but I'm talking about a much more harmonious relationship with nature. And to be honest, I think that most of our separation from nature comes from our theologies, our religions, which are extraterrestrial. And they separate us from nature. My birth religion of Catholicism has what they call the Great Chain of Being, which is a hierarchy of the importance or standing of beings in creation. So it's, God, and then the archangels and seraphim, and angels, seraphim, cherubim, and then we come down to the human, and then it goes into the sort of classes or strata of nature. But I don't believe that. I believe that spiritually we're all the same thing, which is just an individual unit of perception. And that when you come to understand this, you come into a new relationship with everything around you. And you have compassion for everything around you. You feel it. You feel its joy. You feel its suffering. You feel everything. And so this is one of the stages that is supposed to happen in our evolution. Now, when we get that right, we do have the right or the opportunity to use the resources on this planet to develop a technological society that exists in harmony with the natural world. It's not that the two are mutually exclusive. This is what I mean when I say in various epochs we get certain things right. So we might go for a few thousand years and live a very native life and learn all of the nature stuff and reconnect with nature and learn how to communicate with it. But then the moment we try to move out of that, we lose connection with it when we get into the material and the scientific mindset. And then when we get into the material and the scientific mindset, we lose our connection with nature, which is the cycle we're in now. Not the whole world, because we still have native peoples on the world, but this is the Atlantean cycle. The Atlanteans were very technological as well, from what I've read. I've never had a visionary experience of Atlantis. Never had that. Maybe because I've never asked, but... So we're kind of... If you look at the planet now, and you look at the 8 billion people on the planet, almost everything is going on simultaneously. We have the magic and the science, which are the same thing in my world, formula and ritual, repetition of outcome. Ritual repeats outcome, opens a portal, allows you to communicate with certain entities on the other side in another dimension. This is what the occultists are doing. They're generally communicating with very dark entities, extraterrestrial. And those rituals are scientific, and the scientific method is a formula. And when we start to behave in this way, what happens is we lose our empathetic connection with everything around us. And the people expressing themselves in this modality, if you speak up in terms of compassionate union with the life around you, they look at you like you're some kind of Forrest Gump, like you're some kind of moron, you know? And these, of course, are the big eggheads of our time, you know, like Elon Musk and the Weinstein brothers. And I'm not putting down their intelligence or what they've contributed to the human experience. It's significant. They're extremely disciplined people. These are people who work 12, 14-hour days and sacrifice much to master what it is or advance what it is that they're participating in, whether it be physics, evolutionary biology, rocketry, in the case of Elon Musk, and satellites. They're not to be laughed at, and we should not become like them when they laugh at the people who have the empathic connection with the natural world. You know, they're just on a different course, but there's little or no doubt that they're disconnected from most things. And they exist within an amplified ego, which is what extreme mental undertaking does. It amplifies ego and diminishes the empathic, empathetic, and compassionate connection with the life forms around you. And in its darkest forms, we get some of the monsters we've seen in the 20th and early 21st century. Okay? We get monsters like Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright, Pol Pot, Karl Marx, Joe Stalin, Mao Zedong, George Bush Sr., people who go on to kill millions of other human beings, not only do they lose their connection, these cats, not only do they lose their connection with the natural world around them, they lose their connection with other human beings. Satanism is the formalization of this detachment from other human beings, except those like you, those who've joined the satanic darkness. It's a complete detachment from the human experience. Connect, detach, connect, detach. It's a learning experience, and there's no eternal hell, so if you think they're damned, you're wrong. Some of them are in pretty rough shape now. I've already spoken about that on my podcast. Some of the consequences a person might face for behaviors in this time now. You see, our behaviors are amplified now. In the past, you could only do so much damage. If you were a madman, you could only kill the number of people you were capable of killing based on the loyalty of the people who joined your cause and their commitment to it as well, to march for long distances, to ruthlessly decimate the encampment of another people and kill thousands of people in a night, the way Genghis Khan did, the way a lot of warlords do, to kill 100,000 people in a week or 2 weeks, like the Rwandan massacre with the Houthis and the Tutsis. Tribal conflict. But now, with technology and institutional distribution and the institutional conditioning of the human being, you can kill billions. You can defile humanity in ways heretofore unimagined. And this is why it's such a spiritually perilous time, because the debt for these kinds of actions would be so enormous that the creator and the creative agencies would have no recourse but to rebase you at the beginning of creation, because that was the only thing that is commensurate with your transgression. 300 years ago, you could be a Satanist and, kill a dozen babies in the course of ritual practice in a lifetime. And over the next 300 years, you could incarnate 2-3 times and pay those debts off. And that's all permitted. I know it sounds dark. It is dark, but it is permitted down here. Almost anything can be done. Well, anything can be done here. Anything. Anything that can be conceived can be done. The only question is, are you willing to pay the price? The immediate price of the forfeiture of connectedness to other living things and other human beings, and the longer term price of repayment of debt for what you took out of this environment and this energetic space. And that's the way to see it. It's not to be seen in lives. It's not a numbers game. I kill someone, I have to be killed in my next life. It's more energetic. It's more about you will experience what you made the other person experience. So it was interesting that many philosophical conversations and spiritual conversations would ensue when I was speaking with John Edmonds, and it was all pivoting off of Stardust Ranch and the UFO phenomenon. But who would ever have imagined that I would learn so much from John? And how did he know these things? He was told. John was profoundly visited, not just by negative ETs like the Greys that perpetually harassed the ranch, but by very benign ETs who recognized the unique frequency of the ranch and would come in to see what was going on and materialize and speak to him. And this was all the positive ETs you hear about. Palladians, Nordics, things like this. If they are really positive. I asked John one time, how do the ETs see us? And he said, Bruce, in all honesty, they kind of see us like dogs on the side of the road. The way we as human beings regard dogs on the side of the road. We pass by, we might have a moment of empathy and compassion, and then we realize there's nothing we can do for that dog. The situation it's created for itself is so desperate that it really can't be helped. And that's the way John said that a lot of the ET races see us, as a very primitive species, a very combustive species, talented and capable species, capable of so much more than we're living now. But in the time John was alive, dying in his 60s in 2022, which would have had him born, I think, in the mid-50s. Yeah, he was born in the mid-50s. And late 50s. And that's how they saw us. So those were a couple of things I learned from John. And the one that has stuck with me the most is the communication with all the living life forms around you. I'm pretty sure that once you can do that, then you get access to all of the elementary races that are right around us, but living in the fourth dimension. And this would be the fairies, the pixies, the goblins, things like this. And they're all real. They just live at a slightly different frequency, but not much. Most native peoples document them and interact with them. So that's what comes about when you go the empathetic route, when you go the compassion route and you feel your way through life, is you connect with much more life because you've committed to life. And the various forms of life are numerous, not just out in space, but here, right on this planet. Not necessarily physical like us, but nonetheless energetically bound to and energetically bonded to this planet in the same way that we are. So our bodies are derived from this planet, and we require the energy of this planet to maintain our bodies. Food, water, sunshine, all of these things. So we're in an energetic relationship with the planet. These other species, like the fairies and the pixies and the goblins, and too many more to name, by the way, are also part of this planetary system and are in energetic relationship with this planet, just maybe not quite as material as we are and more astral, but still bound to the planet. And we, as the most aware and sentient race or being, the human race, the human beings on this planet, we are supposed to be able to communicate with these races. It really is supposed to be more like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter minus the magic, but being much more aware of other life forms here. These are the dividends of going the compassion route. And this is why the holy people always speak about other races of beings. Okay? And what happened was we got colonized by a small group of negative extraterrestrials. And they've been here a long, long time. So this whole UFO narrative about, are we going to discover life other than human life on Earth. What do you mean discover? It's always been here. Anyone who's come to consciousness has become aware of it. They talk about it. If you read the texts closely, they talk about it. It's not anything new. So there was resistance to writing the book, getting back to what I was saying in the first part of this podcast. There was tremendous resistance. And in this instance, something came in and helped me. And this is a very interesting spiritual lesson, that if you do something in pure heart for the benefit of humanity, and I felt that the writing of this book was for the benefit of humanity and information that was required by humanity, then things will come in and help you. Okay, you can begin to begin cooperating with these other life forms. That white light that appeared, that my wife and I saw, I'll find a picture of it and put it in one of the videos. I have it somewhere. But that light was a conscious being. It came to assist. So, prayers or petitions do get answered. There are other forms of life we can interact with. We don't have to buy into this nonsense. Are the Russians going to nuke us? Are the Chinese going to nuke us? Are we going to nuke them? It's ridiculous. And when we're behaving this way, all higher life turns its back on us. We're disgusting. The same way we turn our backs on the murderers and rapists that we send to penitentiaries. We know they exist, but we really don't want to deal with them because they've done something so ugly, it's difficult for us to even be around them. Imagine how the higher life forms feel when asked to interact with human beings. This is my introductory show for Stardust Ranch. I hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to get into the book proper. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.